My name is Sandra Sheffner. I'm the president of the Democratic Women's Club of Greater Broward. And this is just one more part of the series where we're interviewing different candidates that are running for office in Broward County. One of the reasons why we do what we're doing is because we want everyone's vote to be woke. And what that means is that we want you to know about the candidates that you're voting for. I had an experience some years ago that I don't want to have happen to anybody ever again. I went into the room to vote and I didn't know I wasn't familiar with some of the amendments that were on the ballot. I wasn't familiar with some of the candidates. And so from that day on, I was like, this will never happen to me again. And I hope it doesn't happen to anyone else. And that's why I've taken some time out to meet with and interview and talk to some of the candidates. So today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking with Joe Scott, and he's one of the candidates. And you're good. You're on the ballot, right? You're qualified.
Yes,
that's where they're using.
Yeah, we qualified last week, and we're all set for August 18th.
2020. All right, so we'll start off by just Joe giving us introducing himself. And he did say the date of the primary elections is August 18, 2020. One of the other things that we're gonna do throughout the interview is talk about vote by mail. And so if you want to participate in the vote by mail process, you have to request and submit in your vote by mail request by July 20th, 2020. So that's another date that we have to keep in mind. So I'm gonna stop running my mouth and send over to Joe Scott. Introduce yourself to the people that are watching.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Joe Scott. I'm actually brand new to politics. Before I decided to run for supervisor of elections, I never actually ran for office before. So this has been quite an adventure. And you know, the first question people always ask me is, what made you decide to jump in and run this time?
Especially for this particular office. There's a whole lot of things you could have ran for. So something had to draw you to become the supervisor of election. Tell us about that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the case. So after the 2018 elections, when it was clear that we would have an opportunity to choose a new supervisor of elections here in Broward County, did some deep thought about what exactly is required to do that job successfully. What kind of competencies, what kind of background would somebody need to actually be successful as a supervisor of elections? And it occurred to me that when you see all the different problems and issues that supervisors of elections have to deal with, it's almost always technology-related problems. Either they're having trouble maintaining the equipment, or they're having trouble implementing a new solution that they want to put in for the upcoming election. Or they're having problems with security around the systems. And these are all things that I happen to have a great deal of expertise in my past work experience. And I thought to myself that, we really need somebody who's really tech savvy, who really understands these systems that they would have to deal with in order to be able to get it right the first time.
Okay, I don't want to interrupt you. So you said something that I found really interesting. You said that it's the problem of the SOE's office. So do you believe the issues with the technology and, having to end up doing recounts and all that, do you believe that squarely falls on the person that has the title supervisor of election? Is that all on them?
No, absolutely not, because there's actually a lot, there's a lot more that goes into it besides just sort of being able to implement the solutions. But what I'm saying is that there's often problems that come up, and not so much having to do recounts. Having to do a recount is happens because the parties are very evenly split here in Florida. So there's an even split between Republicans and Democrats, and that's why you have to end up doing a recount. But then the question becomes, do you have the right systems in place? Do you have the right structure in place to be able to execute that mission and get it done in the right amount of time? And it's really not just all about implementing the right technology. It also has to do with having the right leadership skills too. So what I always like to say is I'm not asking people to vote for me just because I'm a tech geek. I also have 20 years of serious leadership position, leading teams under very serious and stressful circumstances. And that's why I think it's sort of a combination of those two things. You need to understand the technology that you're working with, but you also need to understand people and how to lead a team, how to lead a group of people to accomplish a difficult mission. And when you bring those two things together, you know that you'll just have a really good outcome when it comes time to do something like a recount.
Okay, so you said about leading people. I think Because I also I get involved with the elections because I'm usually a poll watcher. As one of the representatives for the Democratic Party, they have different type of to make sure voter suppression is not happening, and I'm involved in that. But on those days, particularly during election time, a lot of them are temporary workers, right? That are involved with early voting, or the ones that are actually working on election day. How is it that the supervisor of election would have some sort of direct impact on such a temporary position, on temporary workers?
Yeah, so yeah, no, that's critical, and I think that you can have a opportunity to really put the right systems in place. So, one thing that I've actually been talking to some folks about is about what systems do we have, especially for this year. We have this COVID-19 going on, and we have to be prepared for the fact that a lot of people we're counting on to be poll workers may not be able to come through for us at the last minute, and we may need to train new people.
And
And
let
we
me,
have to,
and again, I want to interrupt you. And I think that's actually also very true, because most of the, every time I've been at a different polling site, most of the people that were poll watchers and workers, they were older, like retirees, probably that over 65 age. I don't want to, tell anybody's age, but you do have more of an older population. How is it that you'd be able to convince, someone young to take 2 weeks off work or do this job for a temporary position? Because most of the time I've seen they tend to be, more older, retired folks.
Yeah, and you hit the nail right on the head there, is that obviously because it is something temporary, that you would have a hard time getting younger people. I mean, you do have to be able to work with those senior citizens because they're the ones who are able to do it, and they're the ones who are willing to do it. But that doesn't mean that we can't put better training systems in place, that we can't use particularly online training. I mean, I'm finding, especially with the crisis that we're going through now, more and more people who maybe have never gotten online before, they're getting online now. So we need to be able to make sure that that training is available online, so that even once we get into early voting, if people, work maybe the first couple of days and then they're not able to work anymore because they get sick, which is very likely to happen this time around, that we are prepared to replace those people, and that we can give people the proper training that they need by having that training be available virtually. So that's one big thing that we would do as far as making sure that people know everything that they need to know. And then it has a matter of having the right content and having the right plans in place to make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to do. One good example I like to bring up is the Iowa caucuses this year. They decided to use a new app to tally all the votes.
Right, and it ended up being a hot mess, right?
Yeah, it ended up being a hot mess, and really, there were some basic things that when it comes to implementing a new system into a complex organization, which is the type of work that I do right now for a living, there's just certain things that have to be done as far as the way that you communicate with people, and the way that you set benchmarks, and the way that you follow up to make sure that those benchmarks were met. I mean, there's no reason that people should have been downloading the app for the first time while the voting was going on. It was, there was really a lack of planning and a lack of organization around how that new solution was implemented. And it just shows that it takes, in addition, before that, it was a poor decision made to implement a technology that really wasn't ready for prime time. So that's another aspect of it as well. But there's just really a lot to it that I feel like if you have a deep background and grounding in this industry, and you understand how things work, you're not going to make some of those mistakes that are likely to be made otherwise.
Okay. All right. So what you notice is what it is that that gave you the need and the will and the want and the desire to run for this position, right? And you said that you have 20 years of tech experience that makes you want to take this job. What is it that and there was, and I'm going to ask a different question actually. So there was a video that just circulated with the temporary person that that's running the office right now. There was a question asked about community outreach, right? So you talked about like how the technology, so everyone's not going to be able to do that. One of the things that we're also doing is pushing the vote by mail. If you become the secretary, the supervisor of election, are you going to making a concerted effort to engage in community outreach so we can educate people that are not familiar with, people who only know that I have to walk in a place and vote. Are you going to start some sort of community outreach, people to educate, other people that are not familiar with the different options that they have for voting?
Yes. So this is something that's actually very close to me, and it's something that has meant a lot to me as long as I can remember. So my great grandmother was actually the first Black woman in Wilcox County, Alabama, to vote, and and she was stood in line for a long time to be able to make sure that she was there and make sure that she was able to cast her vote. And and this is the type of family history that I grew up with, and even my parents have always been very concerned about this and raised me to believe that. So, for me, the community outreach piece is something that would be very close to me, particularly outreach to the traditionally disenfranchised communities and making sure that we increase our voter turnout here in Broward County. It's really not just about, when I say I want to make sure the job is done the right way, what that really means is that I want to make sure the voter turnout is high, and I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to vote. And I believe that my tech skills give me a leg up, but you also need somebody who cares deeply about, just cares deeply about making sure that people in this community are able to participate in our elections. So just to make sure I'm answering your question, yes, the outreach piece is really big to me. I really want to increase voter turnout. And since you mentioned vote by mail, I find especially that a lot of people, especially in the Black community here in Broward County, there seems to be a lot of mistrust around vote by mail. And I really don't blame them, because whenever I talk to people, I hear these kind of things and I hear these comments that people are worried about their votes not actually getting counted. And it'll be a big concern for me to really increase that, to raise people's confidence and make people feel comfortable with it. Because I believe, and not only I believe, but the data actually shows that people who request a vote by mail ballot are far more likely to vote than your average registered voter. Having somebody registered to vote, maybe about 1 out of 10 in an election like the one coming up in August. But if they request a vote by mail ballot, then 1 out of 2 of those people are actually going to end up voting. And that's the key to getting our voter turnout numbers up. And I want to get people comfortable with voting by mail.
Okay, so the other thing, so vote by mail is one of the things we have to get people to comfortable with. The other thing is like security in voting, I think, is another thing that people are worried about, right? There was it came out that there was something happened in Florida in 2018, and there were 2 counties that were involved. We don't know what the counties are because the governor of our state won't tell us which 2 counties. There was some, they looked like there was some sort of shenanigans happening. Maybe shenanigans isn't the right word. I'm sure that's not a legal term, but there were, as though something went wrong during the 2018 election, right?
Absolutely.
And a lot of people, including myself, had some fears about the 2020 election. I know you may not have any control with that, but like, since you have such a great tech background, what advice can you give the person that's running the office right now to make people feel comfortable that it won't be more shenanigans happening in 2020 during this election cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. So back to 2018, and what happened was they were actually, they were called spear phishing attacks that took place, and they were actually successful in 2 counties in Florida. And what a spear phishing attack is when you basically send somebody an email and you somehow get them to give up their username and password so that you can log into the system as that person. There are some very basic protocols that most organizations have had in place for years to prevent a spear phishing attack from being successful.
Let me ask
for example,
I'm sorry. So when you said the person was spear phishing, they got their username and email, and what did that person who got that information use it to vote for that they used it to vote, or did they use it to redirect or misdirect the person's voter registration? So when they did go vote, they couldn't vote, or is it all of that?
No. So when I say they got their username and password, I'm talking about employees. There was employees of 2 of the Supervisor of Elections offices. So there were employees at 2 offices fell for the spear phishing attack. They gave up their username and password, and the hackers were able to log in. And then from there, we don't really know what else happened because there's not much information put out other than the fact that they said the no votes were changed, and honestly, since the information is classified, we really don't get to know, which is a whole nother issue around whether or not we have the right to know, more information than what's being told to us. And that's something that I would challenge as well when I become supervisor of elections, is that, there's some things that some things that are being called classified information, not allowing the public to know. It's really not right. And we should really be speaking out about that as well. But, but that's sort of the limits. But as far as the spear phishing attack, I'll tell you that there are protocols that many organizations have had in place. Many people, may be listening to this, think about when you're at work and when you get an email from outside the organization, there's probably some kind of banner on that email. There's probably something in the subject line that says beware. This is emails coming from an external source. Don't click any links. Don't open any attachments. So that type of protocol was not in place at the Broward County Supervisor of Elections Office in July of 2019. And I know this because I asked the question, and when I inquired, that was the answer that I got, that they would have that in place within the next 3 months. And it was just shocking because, like I said, some organizations had this in place for many, 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 many years. And especially when you consider that we know the spear phishing attack happened in fall of 2019, and everybody knew about this. That by summer, of 2018, it happened. That we're talking almost a year later, they
still hadn't resolved that issue?
They hadn't resolved that issue. Yeah. And really, this was very early on because this was in July. So this was almost a year ago when I just first decided to run. And it just really reinforced, my whole rationale for running to begin with. Because at the end of the day, you just have to have people in that office who understand the nature of the threat and understand what needs to be done to keep our system safe. And if you don't have people working there, especially in the leadership positions, then you're just not going to stay. You're going to get behind the times. Right. For me, I say this isn't something I just got interested in a year ago. This is something I've been interested in for 20 years, and that interest isn't going to go away anytime soon. I'm the candidate who will be on top of this and will keep our votes safe here in Broward County.
Okay, so I have another question. So they can maybe make an argument that, it's all these things we'd love to do, but maybe it's too expensive and it's cost prohibitive, right? Because everybody has to operate with a budget, right? You got a certain amount of money, you have what you have, and you do what you can do with the amount of money that you have. So the procedure that you're talking about to stop this spear phishing, is it something that's cost prohibitive, or is it something that can be done with like a reasonable budget to stop that from happening?
No, it's not cost prohibitive at all. And as a matter of fact, what's really interesting about it is that a lot of the Broward County agencies actually had it in place. And in some cases, some of the offices that are sort of independent because they have an elected official at the head of the office and they're independent of the county commission, some of those offices do their own thing. And they, but they certainly had the opportunity probably to piggyback off of whatever contract the county had to get that system put in place. And for whatever reason, they just didn't put it in place for the Supervisor of Elections office. And it's just, and honestly, it's because the people in charge at the time didn't see the need or didn't feel like there was a reason to do it. So I'll tell you, a lot of what cybersecurity has to do with, a lot of it really has to do with understanding the nature of the threats that are out there. And once you know what the nature of the threats are, then you know what to do and what not to do in order to keep yourself and your own system safe. Some of the stuff is just simple, like change your password every 90 days and use a complicated password, and and don't install stuff that you don't know where it came from.
Joe, you're the tech guy, but I'm telling you, like every time you go somewhere, everything you log in, they want you to get a password. We can't keep up with all of them. And because they also tell you don't write the password down. So it's like, you want me to change my password every 90 days and I can't write it down? It's too much. So what can we do besides that? Because everybody wants you to have a password, and then they tell you, make sure all your passwords aren't the same. I'm like, are you kidding me? I already have like 50 accounts that all of them need a different password. Who can keep up? So what can they do to also have that level of security, but not have, people having to remember a different password every 90 days. And then on top of that, you can't use the one that you used the last 2 times. Like, come on, Joe, help us out.
Last 10 times. But yeah, so I'll tell you, I think I think biometrics are really the answer to that. I like a lot of the stuff that's coming out, and what I would do, as long as we can make it fit the budget, I would try to get some sort of system where people can use their fingerprint to log into systems. You really can't beat that. You get something like that in place, and that's better than any password you could ever use.
Okay, so with fingerprinting.
Yeah, so that's personally, I'm all for, putting the biometrics in place. I think the prices come down quite a bit on those systems to where it's something that pretty much anybody can use at this point.
Okay. And the other thing that's going on right now is that Amendment 4, it was passed during the 2018 election about, felons being able to register to vote, and the governor just seemed to not like that. What can the supervisor of election do to help, the returning, these felons who may be eligible to vote, to kind of help them register to vote to make sure their vote count in the upcoming election? Or is that a responsibility of the supervisor of election at all? Person at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that the supervisor of elections needs to be on top of. It needs to help create some clarity, because really what's happening is that what the governor's trying to do is he's just trying to muddy the waters. He's trying to make this confusing so that people just decide to sit it out and decide that it's not worth the trouble to even try to figure out what the rules are. Supervisor of elections needs to be on top of figuring out what exactly the right policy is, what the right legal guidance is to put out there. I've seen this, there's this flow chart that's been circulating around that's coming from the ACLU, and I would support something like that. I believe the ACLU is a very reputable organization, yes. And if their attorneys are putting out this flow chart that helps people understand whether or not, they should feel comfortable voting, I would share that, and I would endorse that and say, yeah, we need to, make sure people know that, hey, this is something that you can go off of. Since I'm not an attorney, I would use the guidance of attorneys to and what information I put out. But what's important is that the people have a supervisor of elections that they trust and that they know isn't trying to trick them or fool them into doing something wrong. I did a TED talk last summer about voter suppression specifically, and talked about, one thing is that Florida has been at the forefront of voter suppression since 1865. Ever since we got to a point where African Americans had the right to vote, there have been measures that were put in place specifically looking for how do we stop African Americans from voting. And a lot of these laws that were put in place, they're not common. These laws aren't the same in other jurisdictions. It's not common in other countries for people who commit a relatively minor crime to lose their right to vote. And it's something that is very unique to the United States. It's something that is unique to Southern states. And we need to think about that. We need to look at the history and say, hey, is it time for us to really look at a lot of these laws around how we handle our voting and start changing them? If they were put in place for the wrong reasons to begin with, it's time for us to get rid of those policies.
That's true, because believe it or not, you can become a felon if you drive with your license suspended for the third time. That's like a felony conviction, and you can lose your right to vote just for that, right? Luckily, I shouldn't say luckily or unluckily, in South Florida, usually a judge wouldn't make you a felon for your third time driving with your license suspended. But in many counties throughout this state, that happens. If you live in some of the, maybe North Central Florida or North Florida or whatever, if you have your third driving license suspended, some judge can literally send you to prison for that and then take away your right to vote. And most people, when you think of a felony, you're not thinking of that's something that prevented someone from, losing their right to vote, So it definitely, that is a form of voter suppression to make your third driver's license suspended a felony, but it takes about the fourth DUI, right? So it's just one of those things that a lot of people don't know, but it really is very interesting. So
what's funny is, I want to say one more thing about this, is that we talked about earlier in this conversation how closely divided Florida is, right? And how all of our elections are very close. But when you look at Amendment 4, 65% of the people of Florida agreed on this. It's hard to get 65% of Floridians to agree on anything, but they agreed on this.
Yeah.
How is our governor and this, this legislature that we have in place right now continuing to fight something that 65% of Floridians agree on?
And I think there's And I think it's a misconception with all of that, because for some reason they might have it in their mind that all of these felons are like Black people or poor or people of color, or people that are from underserved communities. And I think that's why they're fighting it. And most people
Yeah.
know Desmond Meade as the face of Amendment 4, but it wasn't only him. There was also a white Republican guy. I can't remember his name. Don't ask me his name, and I don't want to go to lying. That was also a part of that whole thing to get their right to vote. I think he might have had like a financial crime or something like that that made him a felon. He couldn't vote. And there are a lot of poor people
There are, yes.
that have
That's the fact.
that took their right to vote, and they're not people of color.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you just look at the demographics of Florida as a whole, you know that most of those people are not people of color. That's absolutely true.
Right.
And I guarantee you, a lot of those people that are, that are like you said, poor white people, they're voting Republican. So they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot too. Yeah.
So I don't want to, I'm sorry, I'm talking over you, but because one of the main things, right? Because we also remember like maybe about 8 or 10 years ago, we had a pill mill problem, right? Where we had all these doctors giving people these Oxycontin prescriptions, and there was a pain clinic on every corner. So a lot of people found themselves with possession of narcotics charges because, they went and got one too many prescriptions because they got hooked on Oxy, because they would give them 270 pills at one time. They would give them a 3-month supply. So there's a huge segment of the population that's not necessarily people of color, that have felonies, that have convictions because of, controlled substance, and they're not allowed to vote, and they're affected by this too. And I think that's how you get to that 65%. But for whatever reason, I think the legislator have it in his mind that, oh no, if we let that happen, is all these Black people are going to start voting, and they don't realize that they're also impacting people who may have found themselves in trouble over like prescription drug, substance abuse problem, and that's another conversation that I should have with maybe one of the sheriff candidates or the PDs or the state attorney about how they criminalize addiction, right? Because that's one of the things. And there are a lot of people that can't vote because they have a conviction for a controlled substance, right? You have more than 20 grams of marijuana, that's a felony marijuana possession, right? And then now you can't vote. So it's a lot of that is in play. And I think people really should have a better understanding of how someone becomes a felon and lose their right to vote forever, not just like while you're in the criminal justice system, once you're done with your time and all of that. No, in Florida, you lose the right forever.
Yeah. And the fact is that when that law was passed, there was a state senator at the time who said explicitly that the purpose behind that law was to prevent Black people from voting. You put that law in place, and then you have the police forces focus on the Black community, and that's the effect that you're going to get, and that's the effect that we got. And you mentioned that it's almost in some ways it's misguided, because you're right. There's a lot of white people who are affected as well, but it's the same thing with the vote by mail. I mean, this whole idea of trying to stop or trying to discourage people from voting by mail, it just goes to show that we have one party here, and the party that's in power here in Florida, that just really does not want people to vote. And they feel like if they could just reduce the number of people that vote, it benefits them. Any way that they can do it, any way they can reduce voter turnout, it benefits them. And I don't necessarily think that they're right about that, but for me, I think it's all about trying to make sure that all of the citizens, every citizen, regardless of who you are, regardless of what you believe, that you feel comfortable voting, that you have every opportunity to vote, and especially focusing on people who are working class, who punch a time clock, who may have a hard time getting to the polls. We need to make sure that we are focusing on policies that are going to serve that population.
Right. And it shouldn't be so many hurdles. And the other thing that happens is that they keep redrawing these district lines. That's another thing that happens in Florida. Some of the counties, like part of it is in east part of the county, then the other part is in the west, and it's cut out in the middle. And I live in Miramar, like Miramar West. And then like one big street down is Pembroke Pines, right? So It's just like crazy how the city is all chopped up, right? And maybe Miramar isn't one of the only ones, but that's another one of the things that also affects people's right to vote and who it is that they're voting for, as they keep redrawing the districts line to sometimes it's in a favor to make some areas more Republican and then make it more Democratic. And that's another challenge that that tends to happen. And, you know, what can we do about that? Or is that something that I need to speak to one of the state legislate, you know, one of the representatives or the state senators about?
Yeah, no, we have to, I mean, we have to flip it is the legislature and the governor. And, you know, that's where it was really important, you know, for us to win in 2018, because basically it's the people that are in charge right now who are going to get to draw the map for the next 10 years. So, you know, the next time we'll have an opportunity will be in 2030. And I would say it's just about doing that hard work of trying to move the needle. In Broward County, almost all the districts at this point are going Democrat, but you know, maybe focusing on other parts of the state and starting to get the organizing going in other parts of the state to try to flip the legislature so that we have ability to draw those lines. You know, really, I think that possibly the one thing that people can do that we could have the influence to do is to maybe have a constitutional amendment that makes it a nonpartisan process, that takes it away from elected officials and has a nonpartisan commission that is put together to draw the lines in a fair way that's fair to everybody.
Right.
Because right now it's a very political process, and it's absolutely drawn to give advantage to whichever party's in power. And it's not that the Democrats haven't been guilty of doing that same kind of thing in the past, but right now the Republicans are in power and they're the ones who are doing it. And it puts us at a disadvantage. But I would love to see you know, a movement to get a constitutional amendment to make it a nonpartisan process. And if we can make that happen in time to, you know, for drawing the map, which I don't think we can at this point, but
right.
The map after the 2020 census, you know, that would be what we would want to do. Because it needs to change.
It needs to make sense, because if you look at some of the maps, you're like, okay, so on one side of the street, you know, is district this, and then across the street is district something. I mean, something else. It really is insane, like the way they do that. But I want to take the opportunity to talk about the census, because you just talked about, you know, the next time we can do that is in like 2030. So this 10-year thing. So now this is 2020. There's a census that we need everyone to fill out. The website is 2020census.gov. And the reason why the census is important is because that's how all the municipalities get funded, right? Every city, every state, that's how they get funding, by the numbers being counted. I just read something where I think at this point, maybe only 58% of the people have responded to the census, and they were trying to get the number. So we want to encourage people to fill out your census. You got something in the mail, check it out. I think there's a number that you can call. I think it's like 844-330 2020, something like to that effect. You can call, and they do it in every language. You can go to the website 2020census.gov and fill out the census, because all of those numbers are important. And I'll just give one example. Miami-Dade sent out an email that, you know, in 2010 they had like 93% of the people had filled out the census, and it was only 7% that didn't fill out the census. But that 7%, that equal to like $2.4 billion that the county lost because people didn't, or the state or whatever lost because they didn't complete the census. So those when you don't fill it out, it translates into a huge sum of money. So we really do want to encourage everyone to fill out their census. Anyone that was in your resident as of April 1st, 2020, count them in. The information isn't shared with immigration if that's what, you know, our undocumented population is worried about, but definitely make an effort to complete the census, 2020census.gov. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, just, you know, for people who don't know, the COVID-19 really set that back, like a lot of other things. That the census usually sends people around to go knock on doors of houses that they haven't been able to reach. And this time, a lot of that effort was stopped because of COVID-19. And that's why the government's actually really behind in counting that. But at the end of the day, you know, you really want, for your own community, you want to get everybody counted. So if you haven't done it, you should do it right now. Just right now, go ahead and fill out that census.
Okay, so I know one of the things that we people want to do is that they want to, whoever they vote for on August 18, 2020, is able to stay in the office for their whole term. So what kind of assurances can you give the people that if they vote for you, you're going to be able to keep your job?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I would encourage folks, if you are, you know, whoever you're thinking about voting for, go ahead and sit down and Google the names of the people, especially somebody you're planning to vote for, and see what their past looks like, and see if they have any history of getting in trouble and leaving office early. That's something that is very important. People pay attention to. Nobody wants to hear that out there. It makes you look like a bad guy when you do
So
it.
check this
But
out.
I can't say, hey,
Joe,
Google, huh?
I don't mean to interrupt. I think there was a hater doing something, because when you were saying all of that good information, you were breaking up. I need you to repeat that again. Tell these people what they need to do about these folks that they're trying to vote on.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'll tell you what, my son probably has like 3 different devices connected playing video games. He's probably fighting into my bandwidth right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I was saying that when you get ready to vote, I want everybody you need to use Google on these candidates and go and Google these candidates and find out about their past. Because especially a lot of these folks here in Broward County, they have a past. And, they may not have made it through another time served in office. They've had trouble, had to leave early. And, I think that people just need to be educated and know about the background of the people that you're voting for.
And sometimes you got to go like 3 pages into that Google search, right? Because it might not come in on the top page. So you need to go like to the 2nd and the 3rd page and see what it says about that person. Because they may have scrubbed the internet of that information.
So Joe Scott is a common name. There's a couple other people named Joe Scott out there. Yeah. So you need to put Joe Scott Broward in.
Okay.
And I'm not the only person with a common name. So some of these other folks, you may need to put Broward after their name as well, so that you get the right person, because there might be other people that have the same name.
Okay, so you heard it. Listen, I didn't start that conversation, but you really do need to pay attention and get the scoop on the people that you're planning on voting on, because we've had several different candidates that were elected in 2016 that were unable to finish their term. And that's crazy. Like, that's not why the people voted for them. They wanted them to keep their job for the whole 4 years until the next election cycle came up. So that's why it's important, and that's why I think it's really important for us to talk to folks and get to know who they are. Because again, you want to make your vote count, and the person that you voted for can actually keep their job for the entire term.
And potentially and I would say not even just stay the entire term, but actually have the have the goal of turning what you're shooting for doing, you actually care about this and want to turn it into a career. Yes. I'll say that's the case with me. I'm sort of in the middle of my career, middle of my, work life at this point, and I still have a lot more time. And the longer people stay in office, the longer they have an opportunity, if they're the right type of person to begin with. They learn the tricks, they figure out how to do things, and they're able to just produce a lot for their communities and provide their communities with a lot more once they have more experience. So, it's important to think about that as well.
Yes.
And you're right. If you have people who just clearly are, in some cases you'll have people that you can tell, they're ready to jump to the next rung. They're going to run for this, and then they're going to run for something else. And the good way is, if they've already run for 3 other things before they ran for this, guess what? They're not, this is their life goal. And this isn't something that they wanted to do. This is just the opportunity they saw this time around after they didn't get elected, 4 years ago. So, that's something to keep in mind too.
Okay, definitely. And it's good. You're right that you said that, because sometimes you have a vision and you want to make a place better, but sometimes it will take maybe more than one election cycle to do it. Because sometimes, you always have to look like, what are my goals for 5 years? What do I want to see this look like? And sometimes it's like, you can't do everything overnight. It really is a systematic thing, and that you have to put different things in place and to have like a full vision. So definitely. So not only are you saying that you're going to be able to keep your job for 4 years, you'll be able to get it again when the next time comes in 2024, and that's what we want to hear. All right, so tell people, how can they find you? How can they get in touch with you? How can they give you money? How can they volunteer for you if they want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love, if you like what you heard tonight, please go to my Facebook page at Elect Joe Scott, and please like my Facebook page. That's probably my primary mode of communication. Please visit my website. If you go on my website, you have there's a link on there where you can contribute to my campaign and also volunteer to help me out. And I would appreciate any help that anybody out there would be willing to give. And my website is electjoescott.com. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. And also, if you notice the theme, at Elect Joe Scott. So I'm pretty easy to find. I managed, even though I do have a common name, I managed to get Elect Joe Scott across virtually every platform, and you should be able to find me there.
Okay, that's what. So they can give you money, they can volunteer their time, and you're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and I think that's and then you have your website, and they can get in touch with you all those different ways.
I also have a YouTube channel, by the way.
Oh, see, you got a YouTube channel. Like, how they find you on
Yeah.
that? Just go to YouTube and put Elect Joe Scott, and they find you.
Yes, I think so. Hopefully, I think it'll work. There's a very famous YouTuber named Joe Scott. So he doesn't look like me. So look for the Joe Scott that looks like me, and that'll be the one.
Okay, and then you post videos about the different things that you're gonna do.
Yes, I have a few videos on there now, and I plan on posting more.
All right, so we're excited about your candidacy. We realize that someone with your skill set would have been perfect for this election, right? Because I think one of the biggest fear people have is that there's going to be some okey doke, stuff happening in November 2020. So your tech skills, your tech skills would have really been needed. Somebody need to holler at you to try to get them to help them out, but I guess they can't do that because you're on the ballot, and that won't present well. But I hope they're at least smart enough to get somebody, that has the right type of technical skills to assist them. So, everyone votes count, and whoever you thought you voted for was actually the result that was presented. And then, all of our people are duly elected properly during the primary and the November 3rd, 2020 election.
But since you said that, I want to add one more thing, that this is not a one-time thing. This isn't something that you can just fix and then it's done. This is something that will continue to be an ongoing problem, because technology will continue to evolve. We're not going to stop the march of technology. As technology evolves, there's going to be new threats that emerge, and every election is going to be different, but every election is going to have new threats. And we need people in these positions who are going to stay on top of that over time, because it's definitely it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon, or within our lifetimes. This is the new world that we live in.
Yeah, the new world that we live in. All right, thank you very much. So, sign off and tell us all what we need to do for you. And then it was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you all. This was definitely a pleasure. I always love any opportunity to talk. Just like most people running for office, we do like to talk. So I appreciate your support. I really need your help in August. August 18th is the critical election for most of us here in Broward County, because of the demographics and the way Broward County is. A lot of people skip that August 18th election, and we need to get the word out far and wide that the August 18th election is the election for so many of us, and for so many key positions that matter to so many people here locally in Broward County. So please participate. Make sure you're registered to vote. Check your voter registration. Make sure your signature is up to date. And I hope you choose to support me to be your next supervisor of elections. Thank you.
Yeah, so they did send out that vote by mail card that you can send back to request the ballot and to update your signature with the supervisor of elections. So definitely want everybody to do that. And August 18, 2020 is extremely important. It's extremely important. And we definitely want to get all these down ballot candidates in the right position. So, and then in November, of course, we want to change the occupant of the White House. At least that's what I want to do. I don't know what you want to do, but that's what I want to do. And so it's very important, and we want everyone to register, request your vote by mail ballot, because we don't know what COVID is going to look like. And again, thank you. So Elect Joe Scott, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube channel, August 18, 2020, supervisor election.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right.
Bye-bye.